You are highly intelligent. You have always been told how smart you are. You read the books, you absorb complex information effortlessly, and you possess an analytical mind that easily deconstructs the world around you. You look at the people succeeding in the market, the millionaires, the leaders, the conquerors, and you secretly think to yourself, I am infinitely smarter than them. But let us look at your physical reality. Let us look at your bank account. Let us look at the respect you command in the physical world. Let us look at the empire you have actually built with your own 2 hands. It is completely empty. You are currently watching people with half of your intellect, half of your vocabulary, and half of your cognitive capacity completely dominate you in the real world. They are making the money you were supposed to make. They are living the life you were supposed to live. They are conquering the territory that you believe rightfully belongs to you. And as you watch them pass you by, you console yourself with one toxic, comforting word: potential. You tell yourself that you have immense potential. You tell yourself that whenever you finally decide to try, whenever you finally stop procrastinating and flip the switch, you will crush everyone. You wear your unexecuted potential like a badge of honor. I am here to tell you a terrifying truth. Your intelligence is not a gift. It is a terminal disease. Your potential is not a weapon. It is a heavy, rusted iron chain wrapped tightly around your throat, slowly strangling your future. In the arena of life, the title of gifted is the most effective death sentence ever handed to a young man. This is core wisdom. If you are ready to rip the paper crown of potential off your head, if you are ready to burn your fragile ego and walk the brutal path of the sovereign, you are in the right place. Subscribe. We build the fortress together. Let us perform a ruthless psychological autopsy on your paralysis. Let us look exactly at how your mind was poisoned from the very beginning. We must examine the trap of the gifted child. When you were young, you solved a math problem quickly. You learned to read before the other children. You passed the test without studying. And what did the adults in your life say? They smiled, they patted you on the head, and they said, "You are so smart. You are a natural. You are a genius." They thought they were building your confidence. In reality, they were planting the seeds of your absolute destruction. By praising your innate intelligence rather than your raw, agonizing effort, they fundamentally rewired your neurochemistry. They tied your entire identity, your entire sense of worth as a human being, to a static, unearned label. You became the smart kid. And once you accepted that label, you became completely, overwhelmingly terrified of losing it. If a man is praised for working hard and he fails, it just means he needs to work harder. His identity remains perfectly intact. But if your entire identity is built on the premise that you are naturally brilliant, failure becomes an existential threat. If you try something incredibly difficult and you fail, it destroys the illusion. It means you might not actually be a genius. It means you might just be painfully, terrifyingly average. Your ego cannot handle that risk. The thought of being exposed as ordinary is a psychological death that you will do absolutely anything to avoid. So, you developed a brilliant, cowardly defense mechanism. You simply stopped trying. You became the master of the half-effort. You started procrastinating. You started waiting until the night before the deadline to do the work. Why? Because procrastination gives you the ultimate psychological safety net. If you wait until the last minute and the result is mediocre, you can tell yourself, well, I didn't really try. If I had actually put in a full month of effort, it would have been a masterpiece. You use your lack of effort to protect the illusion of your infinite potential. You would rather be a spectacular what-if than a documented failure. You would rather sit high up in the stands and critically analyze the form of the gladiators in the arena, comforting yourself with the delusion that if you ever stepped into the mud, you would easily slaughter them all. You are not a gladiator. You are a ghost haunting your own life. You suffer from an incredibly toxic form of intellectual arrogance. You consume endless amounts of information. You read the Stoic philosophy books, you listen to the advanced business podcasts, and you memorize the complex frameworks. You suffer from the disease of the know-it-all. You fundamentally mistake the consumption of information for the execution of power. You think that because you understand how a business operates on a theoretical level, you are somehow superior to the man who is actually out in the dirt, making the cold calls, facing the brutal rejection, and physically building the company. You look down on him. You think his methods are unrefined. You think he is a brute. But the brute is getting rich, and the genius is sitting in his bedroom, overthinking his way into a state of permanent, miserable paralysis. You are suffering from analysis paralysis because your massive intellect is constantly calculating the probability of failure. You see all the variables. You see all the potential traps. You see a million different ways the plan could go wrong, so you never take the first step. You believe that if you just think about the problem long enough, you can engineer a completely risk-free path to victory. The brute does not see the million traps. The brute only sees the target. He runs forward, he steps in the trap, it breaks his ankle, he drags himself out of it, he heals, and he keeps moving forward. The brute accumulates heavy scars, but he also accumulates massive territory. You accumulate absolutely nothing but theoretical knowledge and a quiet, burning resentment. You must understand that your intellectual arrogance is just a sophisticated mask for your cowardice. You use your high intelligence to rationalize your fear of the arena. You convince yourself that the game is beneath you, simply because you are too terrified to step onto the field and discover that you might actually lose. Let me introduce you to the metaphor of the bankrupt heir. Imagine a young man who is handed a $1 billion trust fund by his ancestors. He walks around the city wearing expensive clothes, acting like a king, and demanding absolute respect from the peasants because of the immense wealth locked away in his vault. He talks endlessly about the massive projects he is going to fund, the empires he is going to buy, and the terrifying power he holds. But there is a catch. The vault is locked, and he does not have the combination. He cannot spend a single dollar. He is technically a billionaire, but he is starving to death on the street. That is exactly who you are. Your potential is the $1 billion trust fund. You walk around with this immense, unearned arrogance, demanding that the world respect you for the genius you possess inside your skull. But because you completely lack the discipline, the resilience, and the sheer, brutal capacity to execute in the physical world, your vault remains permanently locked. You cannot buy a loaf of bread with potential. You cannot buy freedom with intelligence. You cannot buy power with theoretical understanding. You are starving to death while bragging about the gold buried under your feet. Meanwhile, the men you look down upon are the hungry mercenaries. They have no trust fund. They have no natural genius. They were never told they were special. They were born with a blunt sword and a terrifying, savage hunger. They do not sit around analyzing the molecular structure of the gold. They simply grab a shovel and start violently digging. And because they are not afraid of looking stupid, because they are not paralyzed by the desperate need to be perfect, they dig up the gold while you are still sitting at your desk, drafting the perfect blueprint of the mine. Your obsession with your own potential has turned you into a fragile, useless instrument. You shatter at the first sign of real friction. When you finally attempt something difficult and it does not come easily to you, when you are forced to struggle and look foolish, your entire worldview collapses. You think, I am supposed to be a genius. This should be easy. If it is this hard, I must not be on the right path. So you quit. You abandon the project and you immediately move on to the next shiny object, the next theory, the next grand idea, endlessly chasing the high of starting and violently avoiding the agony of finishing. This is the ultimate trap of the gifted mind. It optimizes for psychological comfort instead of physical conquest. It optimizes for feeling smart instead of becoming dangerous. Let us strip away the psychological comfort and look at the brutal, mechanical physics of the free market. We must examine the lie of unmined gold. You love the word potential. It sounds grand. It sounds aristocratic. I want you to look up the definition of potential in the Dictionary of Reality. In the ruthless arena of power dynamics, potential is not a compliment. It is a polite insult. It is a sterile, corporate way of saying, you are currently completely useless, but maybe one day you won't be. Potential simply means you have achieved absolutely nothing yet. You view yourself as a massive, undiscovered gold mine. You walk around with this deep, internal satisfaction, knowing that beneath the surface of your skin lies $1 billion worth of pure intellectual gold. You think the world should respect you for the gold that is buried inside of you. But here is the devastating reality. Unmined gold has the exact same market value as dirt. If the gold stays in the ground, it does not matter if it is the purest vein of precious metal in human history. You cannot spend it. You cannot build a fortress with it. You cannot command an army with it. Until you grab a heavy iron pickaxe, swing it until your hands bleed, dig the gold out of the mud, melt it down in the terrifying fire of execution, and physically hand it to the market, you are entirely bankrupt. The world does not trade in potential energy. It strictly trades in kinetic energy. Potential energy is a boulder sitting safely at the top of a hill. It is static. It does not move. It does not affect the environment. It is completely irrelevant. Kinetic energy is that same heavy boulder rolling down the hill at 60 miles per hour, violently crushing everything in its path and permanently altering the landscape. Your intelligence is just a boulder sitting at the top of a hill. You are static. You are irrelevant. You are waiting for the perfect moment to push it. But the perfect moment is an illusion created by your cowardice. Look at the way you operate when you have a brilliant idea. You sit in your room and you conceive a master plan for a business. It is a genius concept. The logic is flawless. The unit economics make perfect sense. You spend weeks designing the logo, writing the business plan, and buying the domain name. You feel a massive surge of dopamine because your massive intellect has solved the puzzle. And then, the time comes to actually execute. The time comes to make the first cold call. The time comes to ask a stranger for money. Suddenly, the friction hits. The reality of the market punches you in the mouth. Someone tells you no. Someone laughs at your idea. The website crashes. Because you are the gifted child. Because you have absolutely no calluses on your mind, the friction shatters you. You immediately retreat. You tell yourself, the market isn't ready for this, or I need to do more research, or the timing is just off. 5 years later, you are sitting in a coffee shop, scrolling through your phone, and you see that a college dropout with half your IQ just built the exact same company and sold it for $50 million. You feel a burning, toxic rage in your chest. You scream, I thought of that 5 years ago. That was my idea. I am so much smarter than him. The universe looks at your rage with absolute, freezing indifference. The universe says, you had the idea. He possessed the hammer. The idea is worthless. The hammer takes the kingdom. This is the ultimate delusion of the intellectual class. You believe that ideas have inherent value. Ideas are entirely, unequivocally worthless. Ideas are a cheap commodity. Every single person on Earth has $1 million idea in the shower. The only thing that separates the dreamer from the emperor is the sheer, brutal, uncompromising violence of execution. A brilliant idea executed with 10% effort is a complete failure. A mediocre idea executed with 100% savage, relentless discipline is a multi-million-dollar empire. This brings us to the core philosophy of the sovereign mind. We must understand the supremacy of the hammer. Stoicism demands that you strip away your ego and look at your physical actions as the only true metric of your identity. Marcus Aurelius did not become a legendary emperor because he had a high IQ. He became legendary because he spent decades in the freezing mud of the frontier, leading men into bloody warfare and forcing his philosophy into physical existence. You are not what you think. You are not what you plan. You are not your potential. You are strictly, exclusively defined by what you physically do. Imagine two men standing in an empty field, tasked with building a castle. The first man is a certified genius. He is a master architect. He understands the profound mathematics of structural engineering. He sits in the grass with a notebook, calculating the exact load-bearing capacity of every single stone. He designs a masterpiece. But he never picks up a stone because he is terrified that he might place it slightly off-center and ruin the perfection of his design. He is waiting for the perfect weather, the perfect tools, and the perfect mood. The second man is practically a brute. He does not know what structural engineering is. He does not have a blueprint. He just has a heavy iron hammer, a pile of bricks, and a terrifying, obsessive work ethic. He picks up the first brick, slaps some mud on it, and puts it in the dirt. It is crooked. He does not care. He picks up the next brick. He works through the rain. He works through the night. His hands are bleeding. 10 years later, the brute is sitting on a throne inside a massive, heavy, slightly crooked stone fortress. He commands the territory. He is protected from the wolves. And where is the genius? The genius is standing out in the freezing rain, shivering to death, holding a perfectly drawn blueprint of a castle that does not exist. You are currently holding the blueprint. You are freezing to death while congratulating yourself on how beautifully you drew the lines. You must develop an absolute disgust for your own inaction. You must stop worshiping your brain and start worshiping the hammer. Your intelligence is actually working against you. It is a hyperactive defense mechanism. Every time you try to swing the hammer, your brain generates 100 logical reasons why it might not work. The market is saturated. The economy is crashing. I don't have enough capital. The brute does not hear those voices. The brute only hears the sound of the hammer hitting the stone. Bang, bang, bang. You must learn to manually shut down your intellect. You must become selectively stupid. When it is time to execute, high intelligence is a liability. You do not need to analyze the psychological implications of sending an email. You just need to click send. You do not need to calculate the existential dread of going to the gym. You just need to pick up the heavy iron. You must replace the paralysis of analysis with the momentum of blind, aggressive action. To cure this disease, you must commit a very specific type of psychological suicide. You must violently murder the gifted child living inside your head. You must walk up to the mirror, look yourself dead in the eye, and say the most terrifying, yet utterly liberating sentence you will ever speak. I am not a genius. I am completely average. I am a fool, and I have achieved absolutely nothing. When you destroy the pedestal, you can no longer fall off of it. When you voluntarily strip away the label of special, you instantly destroy the fear of failure. If you are just a fool, you can finally afford to look stupid. You can afford to be the absolute worst player in the room. You can afford to stumble, to make catastrophic mistakes, and to bleed in the mud, because you no longer have a fragile, imaginary reputation to protect. You trade the agonizing pressure of perfection for the sheer, terrifying freedom of the beginner. The sovereign man does not eradicate his intellect. He domesticates it. He weaponizes his intelligence not to avoid the friction, but to optimize the violence of his execution. He does not use his brain to build a comfortable, theoretical prison. He uses his brain to aim the hammer. You must implement a strict, draconian embargo on the consumption of information. Stop reading another book on advanced business strategy if you have not made a single, terrifying cold call. Stop listening to podcasts about Stoic emotional mastery if you cannot even control your basic biological impulse to check your phone every 5 minutes. Stop analyzing the macroeconomic climate. The consumption phase is permanently over. The era of blind, aggressive, unrelenting execution has begun. You must force yourself into situations where your intellect cannot save you. You must step into the physical arena where only raw endurance, pain tolerance, and the ability to absorb massive amounts of rejection dictate the outcome. When your hyperactive brain starts screaming at you to stop, when it starts feeding you brilliant, logical excuses for why you should quit and go back to the drawing board, you do not argue with it. You do not analyze the excuse. You treat your brain like an insubordinate soldier. You ignore it, you grip the hammer tighter, and you swing again. I want you to think about the end of your life. I want you to think about your grave. Think about the heavy stone that will mark your existence in the dirt after you are gone. If you continue on your current trajectory, if you continue to hoard your intelligence and protect your ego like a coward, the universe is going to engrave a very specific epitaph on that stone. It will say, "Here lies a man who had immense potential." That is not a tribute. That is not a compliment. That is the ultimate, final insult. It is the universe carving into stone that you were handed the raw materials to build an empire, and you were simply too terrified of the friction to ever put them together. It means you died with the music still locked inside of you. Tonight, you abdicate the paper throne of the intellectual. Take the crown of potential off your head and throw it in the fire. Accept that your ideas are worthless. Accept that your theoretical knowledge is entirely bankrupt. Step out of the sterile laboratory of your mind and walk out into the freezing, chaotic, unforgiving mud of the free market. Pick up the heavy iron tools. Accept the dirt under your fingernails. Let your hands blister and bleed. Do not let them write potential on your tombstone. Force them to write conqueror. This is core wisdom. If you are ready to kill the gifted child, burn the blueprint, and swing the hammer, subscribe. Leave the herd behind.